So hopefully you tuned in to Subhadramati last night. But if you didn't, then look at our LBC YouTube channel and you'll find catch up. So you can follow the life of the Buddha over the days. We'll be building it up to Sunday with a day retreat on Sunday. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for as much as possible of the whole course. Yeah.
Judith says, lovely meditation this morning, thank you.
Oh, that's nice to hear, Judith. I'm glad you were there. That's very good. So I think it's 7 o'clock. Do you make it 7 o'clock?
We've got 1 minute to.
Oh, okay. The clock was a bit fast. Maybe we'll give people. Okay, we'll give people. Hello there, Philippe from Paris. That's great. That's great.
Elizabeth says hi from Mexico City with an emoji of a cat.
Wow, Elizabeth from Mexico City. That's nice. That's nice. That's very good. It's lovely to have people from elsewhere in the world as well, because, well, you really wouldn't be here in the flesh if things were more normal. So I think I'm going to start now. Yeah. Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to the London Buddhist Centre main shrine room. My name's Jnanavaca, and tonight I'm going to be carrying on from where Subhadramati left off last night. If you weren't with Subhadramati last night, then don't worry. You'll be able to follow what I'm saying, but also you can catch up online if you look at our YouTube channel, the LBC YouTube channel. But this is a special week. This is a week-long course where we're really celebrating the Buddha's enlightenment. This is building up to a day retreat on Sunday where it'll be our Buddha Day festival. Normally it's one of the biggest festivals in the Buddhist calendar, and I suspect that this year it's going to be bigger than ever. Normally, if it was like normal times, we'd be able to fit maybe 100, 120 people into the LBC, but we've already got 1,000 people signed up to this course. So I hope that we'll culminate in a sort of worldwide celebration of the Buddha's enlightenment. That'd be fantastic. Anyway, in the week building up to that, Subhadramati, myself, Maitrabandhu, will be looking at the life of the Buddha, at least the mythical life of the Buddha, and drawing out relevance for us in 21st century Western civilization. What does the life of the Buddha have to say to us? What does the Buddha have to say to us? So tonight, the format is going to be a bit similar to last night. I'm going to be talking for a bit. I'll talk for, I don't know, maybe half an hour or something. Then we'll have a period of meditation. So I'll lead us in meditation. So if you're new to meditation, that's fine. If you're familiar with it, that's fine. I'll lead us in a sort of well-wishing metta meditation, but you don't have to have done it before in order to follow it. So then we'll have a tea break, and we've got a special surprise in the tea break. So the tea break is your chance to stretch your legs, get a cup of tea, and that will be for about 10 minutes or so. And then I'll come back and say a bit more about the life of the Buddha, and then there'll be time for questions. So if you have got questions as I speak, put them in the chat, and Stiramanis is going to be collating them and then asking. So if you mark your questions with a Q in the chat, we'll be able to see them more easily. So yeah, you're welcome to ask questions. We'll finish with another short meditation. So we'll finish at 9. We'll be going on till 9. So yesterday, Subhadramati told us about the Buddha's going forth. She talked about him growing up, Siddhartha, the Buddha to be, growing up in palatial conditions. He had 3 palaces. He has a sort of epiphany as a young man where, at least according to the legend, he encounters old age, sickness, and death. In the legend, he just leaves the palace and sees an old person, sees a sick person, sees a corpse, and those 3 sights awaken in him an existential questing, a restlessness that won't leave him be. And then the 4th sight that Subhadramati also talked about was him seeing, Siddhartha seeing the wandering holy man. I think the fourth sight is particularly significant for us because without the fourth sight, all you've got is suffering. You've got the human situation, but you haven't got some sort of intimation of a way beyond old age, sickness, and death. It was the fourth sight of a wandering holy man begging for alms, wandering the dusty kind of roads of India, that triggers in Siddhartha a sense that there might be a way out. There might be an answer to the human predicament. So then he's determined to embark on a quest. In a way, determine's the wrong word. He can't rest anymore. It's like all his comforts and riches, all his former life, lose their meaning, their allure. And they didn't really have meaning, but they had a lot of pleasure and allure to them. And they stop shining in that way. They become hollow, like I don't know, tinsel that tarnishes, and you just think, oh, what am I doing with my life? So for me, and probably for many of you, that does have some resonance. Sometimes we're brought to the Dharma because life, I don't know, loses its allure. We start to become disillusioned with what the world offers us. Sometimes it happens after we start meditating, and we discover deeper riches within and in the Sangha, and then by comparison, our old way of life seems less meaningful. Anyway, the Buddha leaves the palace. He steals away in the middle of the night. And last night we got to him dressed now in rags, in the rags of a beggar, having cut off his hair. He cuts off his fine, long prince's locks with a sword. He just cuts off the top knot, swaps his finery, his clothes, with a beggar, and then walks into the jungle, the Indian jungle, in the night on his own. That's where we were left last night. And Subhadramati was talking about how if this was a film, you'd be panning out now to this enormous, enormous jungle, this dark jungle, and this tiny, tiny figure dressed in rags entering into the dark. And of course, the Indian jungle is dangerous. It's not like I don't know, Hampstead Heath or something like that, the woodland part of Hampstead Heath. It's got tigers and snakes and wild animals of all sorts, creepy crawlies of all sorts. And the Buddha is completely without any defense. He's completely vulnerable, barefoot, walking into the night, into the jungle. And what's more, it's not just the physical dangers. He really does not know what he is going to do. He has this intimation, this intuition that there is a way of finding meaning to old age, sickness, and death, to the human predicament. He has this intimation that meditation is going to be part of the answer, but he has no real certainty. So all he's got is some sort of intuition, which is heroic to quest in that way, to leave everything in that way. Now, he does experience fear. So it's not like he's not a Buddha yet, remember. He's an ordinary human being, albeit an exceptional human being. And he experiences fear. He, later on, when he did become enlightened, talked about this period to some of his disciples, and he said that fear and dread would rise in him in the jungle. And how he dealt with fear was to just acknowledge the Vedana, acknowledge how it felt in the body. So you can imagine him sitting there meditating, and a twig snaps, and you think, is that a tiger? Is that a lion? Is that a snake? what's happening? There would be terror. He would be taken over with fear, with terror, with dread. And what he said he did was he trained himself to acknowledge the feelings, the sensations, and then carry on doing whatever he was doing. So if he was sitting, he would carry on sitting. He wouldn't move. You can imagine if you hear something behind you and you're meditating. Actually, yesterday I sat down to meditate in, I went into my bedroom, and it was in the evening, and I wanted to meditate. And as soon as I opened the door, I saw some scuttling, and it was a mouse. I'm pretty certain it was a mouse that scuttled across the floor. And I almost didn't then want to sit on the floor and meditate. I made myself do that, but that's just a mouse, and it sort of made me question whether I was going to sit on the floor and meditate. A mouse, and the dangers that Siddhartha was facing were really mortal dangers, as they are in the Indian jungle. And he would just carry on. He would just carry on doing what he was doing. Made himself carry on. So I don't know if that's the only way of facing fear, but I find it interesting at a time when there is much anxiety in the world, when we might be feeling anxious at times, when we might even be feeling fearful. Apparently, I was reading, it was on the BBC website, and Britons are frightened now of going out. The lockdown has, in a way, worked to the extent where when we start going out, I mean, when the restrictions start getting lifted, the government is now worried about whether people will actually go out. Anyway, there's real fear around, understandable fear. And I'm not saying that we should ignore that fear. All I'm saying is that Siddhartha was able to really sit with it, confront it, and not let him be distracted from the quest. I should also say one more thing, that the quest for Siddhartha wasn't just a personal quest. I think this is quite important. When he saw those 4 sights and he embarked on this journey to enlightenment, he was looking for answers not just for himself, but for all humanity, including the people that he loved. He recognized that we were in the same predicament, and his questing was not just to escape from dukkha himself, but to find a path that led to freedom for the world. So that, I think, ennobles it even further. So he's questing. The next thing that happens in Siddhartha's journey is he encounters a meditation teacher, a meditation master called Alara Kalama, and he learns from Alara Kalama. He becomes a student, a disciple even, and Alara Kalama teaches him how to get into superconscious states, into dhyanic states, high dhyanic states, and Siddhartha masters. He finds that he can master meditation very easily, to the extent where Alara Kalama soon says, "You've mastered everything that I can teach you. Co-lead this community with me." He has a community of disciples. We'll lead it together. And Siddhartha, having mastered everything that Alara Kalama can teach him, there's extremely lofty superconscious states. He realizes that he's still no closer to answering the problem of death or old age or sickness, for that matter, the human predicament. Because when you come out of meditation from those superconscious states, from those dhyanic states, you come back down to earth again. You're left no wiser. For a while in those states, it's blissful, it's sublime, it's beautiful, it's exquisite, but you come back and you can sort of imagine him, Siddhartha, saying, well, so what? So what? Remember, he's had lots of pleasures in his life. He finds another teacher called Uddaka Ramaputta, and learns even more lofty meditation states, even higher dhyanic states. And Uddaka Ramaputta is even more impressed and says, look, you know more than I do. You take over. You take over these, my disciples. You now lead us and I'll follow you. So there's a real kind of affirmation of Siddhartha's ability to get into higher dhyanic states in meditation. And Siddhartha realizes that it's not enough. Of course, it's not enough. He didn't leave home and leave his former life and everything he knew and loved just to have temporary pleasures. So he leaves Uddaka Ramaputta's Sangha as well. So one thing maybe to reflect on here is that having left worldly status and worldly pleasures, Siddhartha is also willing to leave spiritual status. He somehow renounces a status that could have made him a popular spiritual teacher. There's a temptation there if you start, particularly if you start teaching the Dharma, that you somehow turn that into another career, into another sort of status thing. And it's more insidious because it's more subtle. It's more sort of somehow tempting. And you can fool yourself in a way you can appropriate spiritual gains for yourself, for your own ego. Anyway, Siddhartha isn't going to succumb to that temptation of pride, of status, spiritual status, and he leaves. So then the next trial that he undergoes is, well, he wonders whether the answer will be to mortify the flesh in order to free the mind, free the soul. Later on, he discovers that there is no eternal, unchanging soul. But in Indian tradition, and particularly at that time, well, probably even now, there were many sort of wandering sadhus who would be practicing great austerities, mortifying the flesh, torturing themselves, so that the mind might become liberated from the body. Anyway, that was a sort of a view that asceticism was somehow, it's not even just in Buddhism, is it? I guess it's there in Christianity and probably in other religions, that somehow the body is the problem, and you somehow, through pain in the body, you lose attachment for the body. At least that's the theory. And Siddhartha starts to practice austerities with a vengeance. He becomes a champion of self-torture. So, for example, starves himself till he literally starts to become just skeletal. He says later that you could, if you sort of pressed in his belly, you would feel his backbone. It was that skeletal. He would sit in the noonday Indian sun and light 4 fires around him, the 5th fire being the sun above him, and endure heat. He would not wash his hands, in fact, not wash at all. His skin was sort of, if he rubbed his skin, it would be rubbing off. Awful kind of austerities. And he becomes such a sort of champion of austerities that he gathers a bit of a following. Particularly, we're told about 5 friends who also are practicing austerities, and they start to see Siddhartha as their leader, the sort of champion ascetic who's going to break through into enlightenment and show them the way by doing this. So personally, I can't quite relate to this at all. I'm such a hedonist and a comfort seeker. I kind of think I cannot imagine why would one want to inflict pain. I've just had actually I didn't have dessert tonight, and that for me is about as austere as I get, is refuse dessert, and that's mainly because I don't like rhubarb. So, it goes so far against my inclination. But imaginatively, I guess I can understand that some people do seem to torture themselves. Maybe not in that sort of extreme way, but not far from. And I think in the West, that sort of denial, that sort of self-denial and self-torture is often associated with some sort of psychological or mental health difficulty, some sort of maybe self-hatred that forces us to punish ourselves and cause ourselves pain. In Siddhartha's case, it wasn't born of self-hatred. He, by all accounts, was a very positive, psychologically healthy young man. He had phenomenal will and drive, so he could force himself into extreme practices. But it wasn't born of hatred, it was born of this desire to find the truth, sort of the truth with a capital T. Anyway, I was reflecting on how different our world is, how different our culture is. I guess another factor that influenced him that is very different in our culture is in India and in Buddhism, Siddhartha would have, even Siddhartha before Buddhism, would have had a sense that the meaning of life is to be found beyond life. That the meaning of life is to be found beyond life. What I mean by that is that there would have been this sense that we're on this endless round of birth and death, and rebirth and re-death, and we do it again and again in a way that is futile, doesn't go anywhere, and each lifetime we cause ourselves and other people pain. We strive for happiness, we might get some happiness, but we lose it again, and it ends in sickness and death, or old age, sickness and death, if we live long enough. So in that Indian cultural milieu, there was this sense that there was some higher meaning beyond this round, and that was found, as it were, beyond life. Whereas for us, well, for most of us in the modern West, it's not like that, is it? It's sort of the meaning of life is found within this life. It's our assumption, at least culturally, maybe not for not for you, but culturally, our assumption seems to be this life is all there is. This life is all there is. Now, if that is true, then it sort of makes sense to be as comfortable and happy in this life as you can, because there is no meaning beyond this life. There is no higher purpose to being here. There's no reason that we're here. Personally, I don't believe that, and I never have done. I've always had a sense that I and, well, all of us are here for a reason. That life seems to be about growth, growth of consciousness, and I have a conviction that it doesn't end in death. That's partly my Indian conditioning, partly it's my Dharma practice has given me that conviction, and partly it's sort of life experiences that have given me that conviction that death isn't the end. And from an early age, I can remember thinking, well, if death isn't the end, then what does that mean about life? Since my father died when I was 11, I started thinking, well, if death isn't the end, and I was convinced it wasn't, what does that mean about life? And it was like I was only seeing a segment of a larger journey. And without the larger vision, that segment, I couldn't make out what it meant. You need to step outside in order to see what this life means. Anyway, so Siddhartha would have been practicing in that context, and in that context, maybe mortifying the flesh sort of made sense. Sort of. Yeah, you could understand at least why people might have thought that. So he has these 5 friends, these 5 fellow ascetic practitioners. He's the sort of top ascetic practitioner, the most impressive ascetic practitioner, and you've got to sort of remember he's gone from a life of real luxury, all the luxury that ancient Indian life, could afford, which I guess was very luxurious, although maybe compared to us, it wouldn't have seemed that way in some ways. He's gone from extreme luxury to extreme pain. He's tried the pleasures of the flesh and the pleasures of the senses, and now he's trying pain. And what he finds is that he's no closer to enlightenment through these ascetic practices. What's said to happen is that he collapses near the Naranjana River. He collapses. I guess he might have gone for some water or something, or maybe to wash or bathe. He collapses and nearly drowns. When he wakes up, he fortunately doesn't drown. He comes to and realizes that he could have died and that he's close to death and will have got no closer to the truth. So this path of ascetic practices isn't working. And what he does is renounce ascetic practices. So it's another going forth. It's another going forth. He decides that he wants to live, and he decides that this isn't the way. So he takes food. It's said that a cowgirl was passing when he was laid out, collapsed by the river. And she revives him and gives him some milk rice, rice pudding. And he accepts it, knowing that, yes, he's got to get his strength back because this isn't the answer. His 5 friends, of course, are disgusted with him. They're appalled at this weakling selling out, and they accuse him of reverting to luxury. I mean, rice pudding is quite nice, but their response is fairly extreme. So they abandon him, and they basically decide he's a loser. So he's on his own. He's on his own. And Bhante points out that Siddhartha, realizing that he was on the wrong track and being, as it were, big enough to acknowledge that he made a mistake, is a real sign of strength. It's a real sign of independence of character and confidence to be able to say, I was going all out for this, and now I realize I was wrong. It didn't work. A lesser person might not have the courage to do that, might not have the courage to change their mind and endure the humiliation that came his way as a result of changing his mind. Anyway, he shows that he's prepared to sort of go it alone. And he has a memory, but I'm not going to tell you just yet about the memory. I want to come back to that after the tea break, what the memory was. It was a childhood memory. And we'll come back to that after the tea break. But for now, I want to leave Siddhartha there, having tried different ways, meditation and higher states of meditation with these teachers, ascetic practices, self-torture, and nothing has worked. Nothing has worked. And he's no closer to enlightenment than he was when he set out. It's something like 6 years since his going forth. He's the age of 35. he's no closer, albeit he's a lot weaker in his body and closer to death in that sense, but no closer to enlightenment. Okay, so let's leave him there and see if we can settle into meditation. So if you're sitting on a chair or in a sofa, just make yourself as comfortable as you can, but try and sit sort of upright with your feet flat on the ground. If you're sitting on your meditation cushion or stool, then you'll know how to be comfortable on that, hopefully. We've just dimmed the lights, and what we're going to do is a metta bhavana meditation, which is the development of loving kindness. But I'll lead us into it, and I'll lead us right through. It's a practice of well-wishing, wishing others well. And I don't know how many of us are watching tonight. How many, Stirmanus?
269.
So 269 of us are watching tonight. So let's, in the meditation, see if we can have a sense of meditating together. Mostly we'll be meditating physically on our own, but consciousness isn't bounded by the body. Let's see if we can tune into this field of consciousness with each other, wish each other well, create this field of metta, of well-wishing between us, and then let's extend that out to the world. So we'll start by wishing ourselves well, and then we'll bring each other to mind, and then we'll extend out to the world. So we'll be sitting for about 20 minutes, and I'll lead us through the practice. So making sure you're comfortable. Just settling into your posture. Feeling your sitting bones against the support of the chair or the meditation stool or cushion. So the weight of your upper body is dropping down through the sitting bones, through the support, into the ground. And the more we can let go of the weight of our body, the more deeply we'll be able to relax. And the more the body can relax, the more the mind will also relax. So seeing if you can soften the muscles in the legs. Imagine the muscles in the thighs and the calves loosening. And as that happens, the legs become soft and heavy, giving their weight to the ground. It's very easy to slightly hold on in the legs as if they're braced to move. Seeing if you can let go of any holding on. And have a sense of the upper body rising up, the spine supporting the upper body, rising up in its natural curves from the tailbone all the way to the base of the skull, lifting the upper body without any strain, but with a sense of alertness and uprightness. And softening the face, the muscles in the face. Letting the eyes just sink back into their sockets. The muscles around the mouth and jaw loosening. And the shoulders falling away from the ears, from the neck, falling away down the sides of the body. Noticing sensations in your hands. Imagining the hands becoming soft and heavy. And noticing any sensations of temperature, of warmth, of tingling, of energy in the palms and fingers of the hands. And bringing awareness into the belly, the sensations inside the belly. And even if you can't feel anything inside the belly, letting your awareness come into that area. And into your chest, the heart center in the center of your chest. Noticing how the heart is, what's going on in the heart. Noticing your general mood. Noticing if any emotions are present. Or if there's not very much going on at all. Without any judgment, without any sense of what's right or wrong, just noticing what's there or what's not there, just how you are. And if there are thoughts passing through the mind, noticing, acknowledging them as well, and trying not to get carried away on the thoughts, but just letting them pass through, like clouds through a sky, through a blue sky. So whatever your experience is, in the body, in the heart, in the mind, see if you can acknowledge it without judgment, but with gentleness, with patience, tenderness. And in that gentleness and patience and tenderness, there's also a sense of wishing yourself well, very gently, very lightly, without trying to force anything. Just a subtle well-wishing in the acknowledgement of how you are. And if you want to, you can say to yourself, may I be well. May I be fulfilled and free from suffering. May I make progress in my life. Or you could just have a subvocal intention for those things without the words. Gentle, patient, unforced well-wishing. Keep acknowledging how you are in the body, in the heart, in the mind. However you are, you can turn towards it with gentleness and tenderness and patience and a subtle sense of wishing yourself well. And without losing a sense of your body and your experience of the heart and mind, let's all just bring each other to mind, even though we don't know each other or all the people tuning in. We do know that there's almost 300 people doing the Metta Bhavana right now together. Let's just wish each other well, imaginatively creating a field of kindness between us. Sensing the connection between us. And expanding out into the world, into all beings around us. People in all sorts of states, some in extreme suffering, some sick, some dying, some who are well and relatively fine. Human beings and non-human beings, Just extending our well-wishing into the world. Let's include in the well-wishing those who have died, wishing them well on their journey. May all beings be well. And fulfilled and free from suffering. And may they all make progress. And then beginning to relax the effort, relax your concentration. Just come back to yourself, your physical experience. And let's just sit in the awareness and well-wishing that we've cultivated without trying to do anything in particular. For a little bit longer, just sitting. And then opening your eyes when you're ready. Yeah, very lovely to have a sense of all of you as we meditate together. Yeah, particularly lovely. So thank you for that. I hope you enjoyed that too. So we'll have a cup of tea now, or whatever you want to do for the next 10-12 minutes. So I'm gonna probably go and get a drink. We're going to have a special musical interlude, so you can stay tuned in if you want to. And all being well, Matt is going to play the saxophone. So you're welcome to sort of stay and listen, or get a drink and come back and listen, or not listen at all. That's fine too. You can turn the sound off probably. But what we'll do is we'll gather back here at 8:05. Yeah, good. See you in a bit. Welcome to Matt.
Hi.
So come on in, Matt, and make yourself comfortable somewhere. Just, so it might be too loud, or you might not be able to hear it. You're more likely to be too loud than not hear it. Matt, do you want to be on camera? No. Okay, so Matt's not going to be on camera. He's just going to sit somewhere and play whenever you're ready. Yeah. So thank you very, very much to Matt. Matt, why don't you come and say hello, or take a bow.
Hello. Hope you're having a nice evening.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. That's great. Isn't that just lovely? So thank you very, very much, Matt, for, well, a delightful, delightful interlude. I hope you enjoyed it. Yes, I was, well, I'll just wait until people have come back, but I wanted to particularly, well, include people who have died in the practice, the metta practice that we just did. And some of you may know that there's an order member who died today called Arya Sheila. I didn't know her, and she had been ill for some time, not with COVID-19. Anyway, so yeah, I wanted to wish her well, but of course there are people, thousands, dying all over the world, and as I say, not just from this virus, but all the time, from all sorts of conditions. And we can wish them well. I think sometimes, well, I know that when I've lost both my parents, knowing that I could wish them well felt very, very I don't know, it felt very, very satisfying that I could do something. I feel very convinced that our well-wishing does have an effect, particularly once somebody's died and they're, as it were, the body's fallen away, and the mind is hasn't got the physical body as a sort of a shield. I believe that intentions and well-wishing really will reach them, and that is something that we can do. I think it's a real act of contribution, kindness to somebody who's died, but also, of course, the living. Yeah. Anyway, so look, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed Matt's playing. What delightful. He took time out he's in the middle of Mitra study at the moment, but I persuaded him to take 10-15 minutes out and come and play for us. So I'm very grateful that he did. Okay, so we had left the Buddha to be, Siddhartha, having realized that he was on the wrong track in practicing asceticism, and having decided to renounce asceticism and eat food again. He has this memory, a childhood memory, that then takes on a real significance, a very important memory for him. So the memory is that as a young boy, he is sitting under a tree in the shade of a rose apple tree. I've never seen a rose apple tree, but I had a look online at images of rose apple trees, and they're beautiful. Rose apples are, well, they can be red fruits. I also saw some that were yellow, and it's they're called jambu trees. Dulab jambu means, or dulab jamun is rose apple. So I presume the fruit is really sweet. And certainly the images on Google that I saw, they're very sort of lovely, almost archetypal kind of trees that a child would draw, with very glossy leaves, pointy leaves, sort of leaf-shaped leaves, and beautiful fruit that's hanging. Anyway, he's sitting under a beautiful tree, in the shade of a beautiful tree. And around him, as a boy, around him, there's a ploughing match going on. That's what they did in ancient India, ploughing matches. Sometimes it's interpreted as like a sort of festival, maybe like a harvest festival. Anyway, his father is ploughing. Siddhartha's father was an important figure in the community. Sometimes he's talked about as being a king, but it was probably a republic that Siddhartha grew up in. Anyway, he's a leader of the community, and he's probably taking a lead in this ploughing match. And Siddhartha is sort of watching his father plough the field. You can imagine it's a sort of beautiful day, and he slips into an extremely pleasurable meditative. He wouldn't have known that it was meditative. He slips into an extremely pleasurable higher state of consciousness, but it happens naturally, and it's extremely pleasurable. It's said that dhyana can be the most pleasurable experience that a human being can have in a human body. Anyway, he slips into this pleasurable state, and it's said that the sun stood still. The sun stood still, as it were, all day, which is a lovely way of talking about how, in that experience, he's sort of slipped outside time. It becomes an experience where you You're not in time, you forget time. You forget the body, apart from the pleasure in the body. And he didn't know how long he sat there under the tree. Anyway, this memory comes back to Siddhartha now, along with an intuition that this way of meditating, this sort of natural pleasure that can arise if you don't force meditation, but manage to still slip into concentration. Something to do with the heart being open. He was surrounded by beauty. It's sometimes said that he was also aware of the insects that were dying, the worms that would have been being churned up by the plough. So maybe there was a sense of compassion in his heart. Maybe there was a sense of being moved by the suffering of the world. Maybe all of that was somehow spontaneously present in that childhood experience under the rose apple tree. Beauty and love, a sense of connection with the world, a sense of the rhythms of life, of being part of life, of being connected. Maybe all of that was implicit in this childhood experience. It's a mysterious experience because the suttas don't really explain what was going on. What they do tell us is that Siddhartha intuited that this might be the way to enlightenment, that this pleasurable experience wasn't wrong, that pleasure isn't always linked with craving, with sense desire, that there's wholesome pleasure that's possible, and that meditation can open up that doorway to wholesome pleasure, where there's a real sense of unification of all of our energies. The heart, the mind, the will, the body are all unified, and something beautiful and even transcendent arises. So he intuits that as a boy, he'd already glimpsed something of this, and that maybe this is the way. And what he does is decide that he is going to now gain enlightenment, or he's going to die trying. That if this is the way, he's going to really, really pursue it. I mean, the man does not do anything by halves. And now that he's intuited that this is the way, he's going to gain full enlightenment, full freedom from the bondage of life and death and this round of samsaric birth. And he finds a spot near the Naranjana River under another tree, which is a Bodhi tree. Well, it's become known as the Bodhi tree. It's a peepal tree. And he makes himself comfortable in the roots, around the roots of the tree. It's said that there was a grass cutter who gives him a heap of grass, and he sits on a sort of cushion of kusha grass under this tree, and it's a full moon night, the full moon night of the month that we celebrate as we mark as the month of May. That's when it's said to have happened. And well, actually, who knows how long he sat under the tree. The suttas don't really go into details. What they tell us, and this is what I want to dwell on, is that Siddhartha, who's had this quest, he's been questing for 6 years now, to the point of nearly dying, has this sense that he's found the way, or that this might be the way, and he makes a solemn vow, a commitment that he says that he will not move from this spot until he has gained enlightenment, or before he has died, or he has died. So he says, may my flesh wither and my blood dry up before I move from this spot, or before I have gained enlightenment. So that is, for me, a very challenging, sobering, and moving vow that the Buddha made. Because, well, as somebody who's ordained, when you're ordained, you take vows. You might have watched Sthiramanas's public ordination, and Sthiramanas took 4 vows. One of them is that he's going to dedicate, as all order members do, their life for enlightenment, to the attainment of enlightenment. And that dedication is for the sake of all beings. So it's not just a personal quest, it's for the sake of all beings. So I've taken those vows 20-something years ago. And it is sort of, when I reflect on Siddhartha's commitment, I feel sort of sobered, because I'm not really fully behind those vows, which I took. I'm sort of mostly behind them most of the time. Is that true? I'm not even sure that's true. Let's say I'm partially behind them. I'm somewhat behind them most of the time. That's probably all I can say. And yeah, I feel I've made progress in those 20-something years. But Siddhartha had much more commitment and integration and resolve and will than I've managed. Anyway, I'm not trying to say that that's awful. For me, it becomes something inspiring, that look, there's more possible that a human being can do. On Saturday night, we were watching, in the community that I live in, we were watching Free Solo again. I've seen it before. Free Solo, the film of Alex Honnold attempting a free solo climb of El Capitan in Yosemite National Park. Free solo climbs are climbs where there are no ropes, there's no equipment, there's no safety equipment. This cliff, this sheer cliff of granite that he climbs is 3,000 something feet high, 3,200 feet or something. And it had never been climbed free solo before. So nobody had attempted it free solo. And he attempts it. And the whole film, I won't tell you whether he makes it or not, but the whole film is terrifying and beautiful and inspiring to watch. You follow this man on his sort of journey of preparing to climb free solo, El Capitan, and then you watch the actual attempt. There are film crew that go up, climbers who go up with him to film the attempt, and you know that he could die at any moment, and it's one of the most sort of terrifying but also inspiring films that I've seen. And he's not Siddhartha, he's not a Buddha, but what I was struck by is how he was able to harness all his will behind this project, this goal, this quest, and he gives everything for it, knowing that at any moment he can die. I wouldn't advise following a quest where you can die in that way. I'm not saying that that's in itself sort of noble, but the sheer determination and gathering of all the forces of energy and will, and being so single-minded, and of course on the climb he has to be 100% aware and focused. Sometimes it's not even just a sheer wall of granite. Sometimes it's overhangs, and he's hanging on, gripping on just by his thumbs sometimes, and the pressure of his feet against the rock. Anyway, I imagine Siddhartha having that sort of will, that sort of energy. But his quest is an existential quest. It's not just a physical endurance quest. It's an existential questing for the meaning of life, a meaning that transcends death, a meaning that makes sense of death and of not just one life, but this round of lives, and a quest that is for all beings. He wants to open the doors to the deathless. That's how he puts it. So that sort of commitment is, for me, it just feels extraordinary. Well, it is extraordinary, not just for me. And although I'm nowhere near making that sort of commitment, and or even the sort of commitment that Alex Honnold made, all those sort of sacrifices that he makes and the Buddha to be Siddhartha makes, although I'm not doing that in that degree, I think for me and probably for all of us, commitment still is something that we need to do to whatever degree we can. I don't think we can always do it in one, well, we can't do it in one fell swoop. We can't just say, right, I'm going to commit to something or die. And yet we can take steps towards deepening of commitment. That's what my ordination in Triratna represents. It represents an effective commitment to the quest for enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Effective in the sense that most of the time you're in touch with that commitment and you are prepared to make certain sacrifices for that commitment. And you're prepared to keep deepening that commitment. You're able to keep deepening that commitment, for the rest of this life and maybe lifetimes. So that's where we're going to leave Siddhartha. That's when I'm going to sort of end the story for now. And tomorrow, Maitreya Bandhu is going to pick it up from this point of having made a steadfast commitment of having sat down on this full moon night under this tree, this magnificent tree. The spot where he sat became known as the Vajrasana, the diamond throne. Mythically, it's the seat where all the Buddhas have always sat and gained enlightenment. It's said to be the axial point in the universe, the central point in the universe, the point that first formed out of the chaos when the universe formed. All of that's trying to, in mythic terms, trying to say that what Siddhartha was doing, this quest for enlightenment, had cosmic, universal significance. It wasn't just one man doing what he fancied doing. The discovery of the path to enlightenment is of cosmic, universal significance. And tomorrow, Maitreya Bandhu will say more about, because the quest isn't over yet. The commitment was made, but in a certain sense, the ordeal has just begun. So tomorrow, Maitreya Bandhu will be looking at that, and then the following day, I'll be looking at the attainment of enlightenment and what that means. But for now, it would be good to see if you've got any questions or thoughts that you want to share. And if you have questions, I'll try my best to answer them. Stiramanis is going to sort of read them out. And I'll try my best to answer them. And then we'll finish the evening with another shorter period of meditation, of sitting meditation. So yes, I don't know if there are any questions, sort of related probably to the story so far, either what Subhadramati was relating yesterday or what I've talked about today. On the other hand, if you've got some burning questions about your Dharma life that isn't related to the story, then do feel free to ask as well. That's fine. So, Stiramanis, do we have any questions yet?
Yes, so Pippa was asking if it's like enlightenment as as an idea, as a goal,
Hmm.
was around before the Buddha? How did he know what he was
Hmm.
looking for? If he was the first?
Yeah. Hi. Thanks, Pippa. Yeah, good point. Yes, it was. I believe it was. There was this in Indian culture, in ancient Indian culture, there was this idea of liberation from the round of birth and death, and there would have been this tradition of homeless wanderers going in quest for that liberation. Shramanas, they were called. So you had a more established, as it were, religious tradition that later became known as Hinduism. But you also had these sort of freelance ascetic wanderers who had left their home, their possessions, their families, their loved ones in quest of this liberation. So Siddhartha was, in a way, following a respected tradition. And people would have supported these wanderers by giving them alms, by primarily by giving them food. So there was a cultural recognition of the importance of this sort of quest. Yeah, which of course we don't have. We've lost. In India today, you can still have that, but it's probably on the decline. Yeah, I mean, Bhante Sangharakshita went in a way the footsteps of the Buddha. He gave away all his possessions. He gave away his clothes when he was in India. He and a friend of his dressed in rags. They took some rags, some cloths, and they coloured them with mud, which is what a traditional ascetic sadhu does. So they were stained with mud, the yellow of the mud. They dyed them, and they went barefoot, wandering from teacher to teacher in quest of, in Bante's case, a Buddhist teacher who would ordain him. But he visited lots of Hindu teachers, sadhus, and learned from them. Yeah. So that was in the 40s in India. So, it's still there. Mm.
You've got some questions about enlightenment. So Jack is asking what actually is enlightenment, and Judith's asking how does God know when he was
enlightened? Yes. So thanks, Jack. Thanks, Judith. I'll say a little bit, sort of since you asked, but I won't say too much because I'm going to talk about it on Thursday. Thursday's the actual full moon day in May. So on Thursday, I'm going to be talking about the attainment of enlightenment, what that means. I don't know what it really means. I mean, I don't really know because I'm not enlightened, but I know how it's talked about in the tradition, and I can extrapolate from my own much more limited experience of the Dharma, and maybe sort of hint at it or point at it. But for now, what I could say is, what can I say? I said earlier that Siddhartha was looking for a meaning of life beyond life. And it seems that there's an aspect of consciousness that isn't to do with the body. It's not restricted by the body. An aspect of human consciousness, all human beings, us. There's an aspect that the sort of deepest aspect of consciousness isn't limited by form, by our bodies. It's not limited by anything in this world of conditions, of form, of change. It's not limited. There's an aspect of human consciousness that transcends not just this world of form, but it also transcends time and space, and therefore it transcends what we think of as life. and also what we think of as me. It transcends all of our categories of knowing anything in the world or identifying anything in the world. That aspect of consciousness is our birthright. It's there in us, but normally hidden under layers and layers and layers of delusion and sort of self-centeredness that keeps that hidden from us. So you could say that enlightenment is uncovering that aspect of consciousness, or realizing that aspect of consciousness, and not just realizing it, glimpsing it, but being able to be completely transformed by it. That consciousness, it's so other than the consciousness that we normally inhabit. It's so other that it seems to come from outside of us. It seems, at least at first, to be nothing to do with us. It seems, if we were in a theistic tradition, it would be like being touched by God or the Holy Spirit or something. It seems to be visited upon us and come through us. So you could say it's a transcendent consciousness that Siddhartha opened up to. Not just opened up to, but he allowed it to come through him and transform him. And in that transcendent consciousness, love and peace and freedom are natural. It's sort of, it's not an empty space. It's brimful of qualities like metta, of unconditional love, of the deepest peace that can ever be imagined, of complete contentment and fulfillment. So all desires are, as it were, fulfilled. In fact, desire itself is quenched because there's complete contentment, and a contentment that doesn't depend on anything external, anything in this world. A complete freedom from anything that happens in this world. Even death can't touch this deepest consciousness. Yeah, I won't say any more, but in a way, all that I've said is I've used words to try and point to something that can't be captured in words. But it was, I don't know if I was a Zen master and you were a Zen disciple, a Zen master would probably thrash you for asking the question or something, in an effort to point out that words are useless. Words are sort of useless. I don't think they're completely useless, actually. I think they can point the way and inspire us. But we have to discover these riches within our own hearts and minds, and they're there. They're there. Yeah. Thanks, Jack. And Pippa, was it, for asking?
Maybe you, I think people can't all hear me clearly, so I'll try and speak out loud, but maybe you can read
Sure.
as well.
Sure.
So I've got a few good questions. I'm sort of collating between Sarah and Josephine and Anna and I think others. Talking about how about the commitment to enlightenment.
Oh,
That
yes.
seems like a pretty scary prospect. And questions around does it have to be enlightenment we commit ourselves to, and also how do we overcome the fear of commitment?
Yeah, so good questions. So Sarah and Josephine and Anna and Hannah, is it Hannah? Asking about commitment and does it have to be commitment to enlightenment? The scary kind of nature of commitment towards enlightenment. Yeah, I think for us, commitment is always going to be gradual. Siddhartha's story, remember, is well, the story as I've told it is a legend. So legends are they're meant to inspire us, and they're unequivocal. I mean, maybe it really did happen like this, but a legend sort of presents things in bold, big colours and big sort of statements. So Siddhartha sits down once and for all to gain enlightenment. For us, I don't think that's probably possible for most of us. For me, speaking personally, what I have to do is commit in much more smaller stages. So for some of us, a good next commitment would be to have a daily meditation practice. That would be a really good next commitment for some of us. If you've already got a daily meditation practice, see if you can extend it. See if you can make a commitment to practice the 5 precepts at a more, I don't know, more serious level. Deepen our practice of the 5 precepts. Maybe just one precept. Maybe you just make a commitment to not speaking harshly or trying not to speak harshly, or being more generous. In small ways, just focusing on generosity or whatever it is. I think for us, the commitments are probably of necessity, but maybe it's even advisable. They're gradual. If you keep practicing and you take the next step in commitment, then you find that it just becomes easier. It's a bit like any sort of art or practice. I'm trying to learn the piano at the moment. Eventually, as it were. I've said this for a couple of years, but I am now trying. And so I've sort of have I made a commitment? I'm trying to play for 15, 20 minutes every day. And it's getting easier. I mean, I'm making progress. It's not a huge commitment, but it is the next commitment, if you see what I mean, that I need to make if I want to play the piano. So I think it has to be gradual. It has to be appropriate for you and realistic for you. I think if we are unrealistic, if we don't know ourselves and we say overstep the commitment, then probably there'll be a reaction from within, and then we'll probably rebel and give up altogether. If I said that I was going to play the piano for 2 hours every day, I might keep it up for 1 day or 2, and then more likely, I'm likely to drop it completely. So we have to kind of know ourselves. And sometimes it's good to ask friends and say, what would the next step for me be? Yeah. Hope that helps. So, yes, it is scary, and it doesn't have to be terrifying. Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be to enlightenment. It doesn't have to be. Well, in a way, we can't know what enlightenment is. And if you haven't yet got confidence, shraddha, that there is something called enlightenment, that this sort of deeper consciousness I was talking about, or higher consciousness, if you haven't got experience of that, if you haven't got confidence that that's true, then you commit to what you can have confidence in. So you might have some confidence that meditation helps you live a more fulfilled life, or manage anxiety or whatever. So then commit to the next step of that path. Yeah. So you don't have to worry about enlightenment if you don't want to. Good. Any other questions?
Anna saying thank you very much for that. That's very helpful, very practical.
Oh, good. I'm glad, Anna.
So far.
Yes.
Question from Matt. He's saying, noticing that Siddhartha kept sort of moving between different approaches. And he was saying, does this mean that how do we know we should follow Buddhism as opposed to finding our own truth?
Yeah, good question, Matt, and probably a question that others have had or have got some at least some of the time. In a way, you don't know, do you? You don't know. You don't know. I mean, the Buddha to be, Siddhartha, is said to be, at least according to the Buddhist tradition, the first person that gained enlightenment. So when he was questing, there was nobody else that had attained enlightenment. So he had to find his own way through trial and error. Now he has gained enlightenment, at least that's according to the Buddhist tradition. You may not have confidence that the Buddha is the Buddha, as it were, that Siddhartha really gained enlightenment, that he really gained what he said he gained. And in a way, that's fair enough. I think it is okay to be skeptical in Buddhism. It's fine to be sort of skeptical. What Buddhism does ask is that you give it a go. If we don't try to live a Dharma life, if we don't try Buddhism, actually try it for ourselves, not just read about it, but try it. If we don't try it, we'll never know whether what the Buddha claimed to have achieved was true or not. We'll never know. But of course, in the trying, there's also a risk that you might be barking up the wrong tree, that you're taking a risk. I can remember when I was invited to be ordained. You have to be invited to be ordained. I'd been, you have to ask to be ordained, then you have to train to be ordained, which takes a number of years. So I'd been training for probably best part of 3 years, and I was invited to be ordained. And I can remember thinking, I don't know if this path that Triratna treads, that Bhante Sangharakshita has laid out for us, I don't know whether it actually leads to enlightenment or not. Maybe I should be practicing in another context with another teacher. I can remember thinking, I don't know. And I don't know anybody who's fully and perfectly enlightened. So maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And then what I decided, I can remember consciously, I was on a retreat, and I decided that, okay, I didn't know and I couldn't know. And all my experience so far led me to the conclusion that this was the best path that I'd found. And I could go on looking for other paths, but for me, I decided to take the risk and sort of throw in my lot with this path, with this Sangha, with this teacher, and then see. That was definitely a risk, and it's a bit like the spiritual life isn't. There are no real safety nets. Alex Honnold didn't have any safety net. He chose to take the risk. And of course, I'm not saying take that sort of risk, but unless we take some sort of risk, how will we grow? When somebody says, look, practice this meditation and it will, you'll grow as a result, you can't know whether they're telling the truth or not, or whether it really works. We have to try it and then see. And if it works, then you might want to try the next thing that they teach you. That's a sort of, I think, an intelligent skepticism that's also open to trying. I think that's in a way what the Buddha recommended. He said, don't take his word for it. Try it for yourself. Unfortunately, the path is a gradual path. You don't have to give up everything like the Buddha did. You don't have to leave home and job and go off into the jungle. You couldn't, even if you wanted to. There are no jungles left in this country, not really. And you don't have to do that. You can take the next gradual step that feels manageable. Yeah. and who knows where that will take you. But it's also worth, if you want to, looking around and trying other spiritual traditions, either in Buddhism or in other traditions altogether, and seeing where you feel at home. That's worth doing. Although at some stage it would be good to then make a commitment to one path, because unless you make a commitment to one path and go deeper in that path, you don't experience the fruits of it, and therefore of any path. Yeah. Hope that helps, Matt. Maybe one more.
One more, and do repeat it after me as well. Phoebe's asking, how does one make the quest towards enlightenment most beneficial for others as well as oneself? Okay, yes. So Phoebe's question: how does one make the quest for enlightenment most beneficial? Is that right, Siramanus? For other people. Yeah. For other people, how one, as well as oneself. Yes. I think that's an interesting question, Phoebe, because and a real question, because there is a danger in Buddhism to somehow be practicing just for oneself, because I want to be happier and more fulfilled. And probably most of us start on the path because of that, because we want to be happier and more fulfilled. So in a way, it's not to be knocked. I don't want to knock it. It's just that pretty soon one realizes that if one is just practicing for oneself, you can't get very far. The path is a path of transcending our self-centeredness. It's our self-centeredness that keeps us unenlightened. So if I'm just trying to transcend self-centeredness for myself, I tie myself up into knots. The path has to involve an altruistic intention to serve other people, to help other people, to benefit other people. That intention is very, very important. The intention behind our practice changes the practice. It changes the actual experience of the practice and the consequences, the result of the practice. So, for example, when we do the metta bhavana, the traditional intention is that we really want to benefit other people. So the metta that we're cultivating, I was talking about people who have died, but it also applies to people who are living. Metta really affects them, and we're trying to benefit them. That's quite a subtle way of benefiting them, because after all, metta doesn't feel very tangible, although it can do, but most of the time it's very subtle. But Buddhist ethics is based on trying to benefit other people. Benefit in the end all beings, but all beings includes ourselves. So Buddhism isn't saying, look, let's become a martyr and sacrifice our own well-being for other people. It's not saying that either. It's saying we need to be concerned for the well-being of ourselves and all other beings. We're all in this together, and it's that sort of intention, that sort of approach to life that then eventually can lead at least to a sort of a genuine self-transcendence. And it's that self-transcendence which is what will lead to enlightenment. So I think it's an important point, because particularly in our modern Western culture, Buddhism's arrived in the 20th century into our modern Western culture. And I think it's fair enough to say that our modern Western culture is more sort of individualistic than probably any culture, in history. Post Second World War, that individualism seems to have, well, from what I gather, it's become intensified.
a sense of community, a sense of our duty to one another, that's been eroded. I'm not saying completely, and I'm not saying for everybody, but culturally, we live in a quite self-centered culture, in the West, at least, in the modern West. And it's possible that Buddhism somehow gets appropriated into that individualistic way of being, and gets turned into, rather than a path of genuine self-transcendence, it then gets turned into a path of well-being for myself alone. Yeah, which in a way you don't want to knock. I don't want to knock, because well-being for oneself is sort of fine, but it's very limited. It's it won't lead to enlightenment. Yeah. So I think we have to watch that our Buddhism doesn't get appropriated into a Western value system, that we try and practice the Dharma as it's sort of traditionally practiced, which then would include an intention for all beings, the welfare of all beings. So thank you for asking that question, and thank you to everybody who asked a question. I'm sorry I haven't got to all the questions. I'm presuming, Stiramanis, there are other questions.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm really sorry not to. We've run out of time. We will have, more time. Well, I'll be back on Thursday. Tomorrow is Maitreya Bandhu, so save some questions for him. Sorry, it's not been possible to answer all of them. I hope it's been a worthwhile evening. Certainly, I've enjoyed it, and I've really appreciated having a sense of us practicing together. For me, it's been a real. This lockdown has shown that actually, even though we're physically separate, we can have a real sense of practicing together, which in a way I always knew theoretically, but it's brought that home for me. So thank you for sort of joining me this evening, and giving of ourselves to practice. I think it's a really worthwhile thing to do for ourselves, and I think for the world around us. So I'd like us to sit for a few more minutes, and then I'll make sure we come out just before 9 and end at 9. So maybe we could just settle back into our sort of meditation posture, or just sit comfortably on a chair, but make sure you're upright. And maybe take a few deeper breaths, so that you let go of all the words and come back into the body. And particularly on the out breath, it's really good to have a sense of letting go of any holding on in the body. It's almost like you're breathing out a sigh of relief. And then let's bring to mind once again people around us in this country, or in whichever country you're in. People all over the world in different states of being. Some of them in very, very demanding, difficult states. Some of them well and happy. All the people who are caring for the sick. Let's just have a sense of solidarity. with all of life and a sense of care and well-wishing. And include in that those who have died, either recently or even years ago, wishing them well. Include in your awareness, if you want to, a sense of all of us tonight practicing, creating this field of metta that's then radiating out to all beings. Like sunlight through the universe. And then coming back to your own experience, your own body, your heart and mind, and just resting in the body. And then when you're ready, opening your eyes. Good, so yes, once again, thank you very, very much. And yes, so tomorrow night, Maitre Bandhu, who many of you will know, and if you don't know, well, he's a very senior, experienced practitioner and teacher and well-loved teacher here at the Buddhist Centre, London Buddhist Centre. So join him at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. And on the link below, in the chat below, there'll be a link to making a donation if you'd like to make a donation. At a time like this, where most of our activities, our retreats and courses are closed, like many, many people and many businesses, we need money more than ever. On the other hand, if you don't have money, you don't feel obliged. Everything that we're offering is free. So we're trying to practice a culture of generosity. That is what Buddhist cultures should be like, and it's mutual generosity. So if you can give, then that's lovely. If you can't, then that's fine too. If you can give them, if you are going to give, and you can give a monthly donation. That would really help us plan in this very, very uncertain time. But I can also appreciate if you can't do that. So hopefully see you again very soon. I'll be leading meditation at 8:15 tomorrow for those of you who know how to meditate. Garavati is doing some newcomers meditation also tomorrow morning. And then, yes, tomorrow evening at 7 p.m., Maitra Bandha will be continuing the story. So hopefully see you very soon. Have a good evening. Good night.